Madam Chair, you have a quorum.
Thank you. Call to the public. At this time, any member of the public is allowed up to 3 minutes to address the Parks and Recreation Commission on any issue not already on tonight's agenda. Pursuant to the Arizona Open Meeting Law, at the conclusion of call to the public, individual members of the commission may respond to criticism, may ask staff to review the matter, or may ask that the matter be placed on future agendas. A commission member cannot take action on or discuss matters raised in an open call to the public unless the matters are properly noted for discussion. Do we have anyone who is here for a call to the public?
I want to ask some questions, but I don't know if it's not being addressed at this meeting, because I don't know what's going to be addressed exactly.
Do you not have a copy of the agenda?
There's one at the door, I can grab one. I have concerns with the Parks and Rec, yes.
Okay. If you'd like to come up to the podium and give us your name, and then if we can discuss it or answer your questions, we will. If not, if it's not on the agenda, we wouldn't be able to discuss or make any decisions. The podium up here. Okay.
My name is Marilyn Gossett. I've lived here approximately a year and a half. And a big problem I have with Sahuarita Parks and Rec is there is no rec for older people. I did understand that you have your little Animax Park, which is so small, it can handle 20 people in an exercise program. It's not big enough. This town is 25 years old. They should have a social center, not just for children. I think everything you do for children is wonderful. But if you don't live in Rancho Sahuarita, you ain't got nothing. And I'm paying pretty good taxes. I think that there needs to be a senior center, not necessarily for senior citizens. The town I came from was about 30,000. They had 2 senior centers. The age was 40 and up. And it was open all the time. You could go in. It did not have to be ran by anybody. It gave a place for people to meet, people to socialize. This township is how old? And 26 years old, and they still haven't provided anything like that. And there's usually grants that you can do to get that. I resent that there is nothing provided for my age group or for other adults. I understood that last year they had a community swimming pool, and this year they advertised that they were going to do it, but no time was selected. And when I called, they said, oh, no, we're not doing it. And when I talked, I don't know who the gentleman I talked to, he said they can't afford the lifeguards because they don't get any participation. My feeling is you will get the participation if you get the adequate communication. Because how many people live in Sahuarita that are not in Rancho Sahuarita? I know from Sahuarita Road to Duval Mine, and there's a lot of houses. And they need something, and those children need a place to go swim. I feel like this is all stuff that needs to be addressed. And like I said, the town's 26 years old. It should have already happened, not in the next 12 years.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it. Anyone else for call to the public? Okay. So approval of the meeting minutes from the March 2nd meeting. We just got the minutes now, so we were just quickly skimming over them. I do have a correction on under business number 2. The dates that we agreed on for this year were March 2nd, June, but we postponed it to today, September 7th and December 7th. So it's the August and October that are incorrect on the minutes. So if we could correct that. Okay.
I was going to move to
Commissioner-
approve the minutes with those changes.
Okay. Anybody else have any comments? Can I have a second for the minute approval?
I second.
I have one
Okay.
comment. I
Okay.
just apologize. I'm never late, and I'm very sorry that I walked in here late.
Okay. Thank you, Commissioner Anderson. Okay, so the motion is from Commissioner Allen, the second is from Commissioner Jeff Ahern. All in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? Okay, minutes approved with those changes. Okay. So business, we've done the approval, the final budget report. Laura, over to you.
Thank you, Chairwoman and Commissioners. Welcome. Thank you for being here tonight. I wanted to give an update because our last commission meeting, we talked about the budget. We had our budget presentation. So with approval of our town council in a week, this will be our next year's fiscal year 2023 budget. Can we all move the slide, please? So our operating budget came in at $3,193,370, which is an increase of about 11% from fiscal year 22 budget. Our capital improvement budget will be $1,359,000, so that we have a lot of fun projects coming up. And then we have our employees. We have 18.4 full-time employees and 14.6 part-time and seasonal employees. So that, you know, 1.3 million in capital improvement money will go to finalizing the Animax sewer line extension. We also will be getting a park maintenance facility because our park workers have really no place to work out of. So this will give us some office space and things that we need to be compliant with OSHA. And then exciting news, we'll a little bit later learn about the Twin Buttes Trail Park, trailhead, trails, and restrooms. That has all been budgeted as part of this plan. We have large equipment purchases, and this will be an ongoing yearly CIP budget so that we can make sure we get the equipment and maintain the equipment that we need to build and take care of parks. We are also going to have the start of also our playground replacement. That'll be over the next 8 years. And this one will start at Los Arroyos Playground, where we'll make it an inclusive playground with rubberized surfacing and extending that playground with new equipment. And then as part of the sewer line extension, it leads the way so that we can start making our large city, town splash pad at Animax Park. So that's exciting. And then as always, we're always working on shade, so we have our shade replacement program. And so that's the gist of our overall budget of what is tentatively approved and hopefully will be finally approved next week. But moving forward, that's what we'll be working on. Any questions?
Any questions?
No.
Okay,
Thank you.
okay, thank you. Number 3, Barry Dunn, Master Plan Survey Findings.
Thank you. So as you know that we have been working on the Parks, Recreation, and Trails Master Plan. This is a 5 to 10 year overlook of what facilities and parks that we need in this town. Just to our comment that yes, we are behind and we are working on coming up with solutions. So Teresa and Dave from Barry Dunn are here to present the findings of the preliminary, basically data collecting survey of what we're finding that the citizens in our community feel that we need are the priorities for our Parks and Recreation and Trails Master Plan. So I'll turn the time over to Teresa.
Great. Thank you, Laura. It's a pleasure to be here with you, Commissioners, Chairperson. As Laura said, my name is Teresa Jackson. I'm with a company or a firm called Barry Dunn, and we're leading the master plan development for the department. This is a 10-year comprehensive master plan, so it's really the 10,000-foot view of the system, looking at what your level of service is today and what it needs to be as your community continues to grow. So tonight we're going to share with you a handful of things that we've done to date. Our next step is to start drafting the document and looking at recommendations, but before we get to that stage, we want to make sure that the commission, as well as the staff and the community, are aware of what our current findings are. So when we get to the recommendation stage, you can really see what those are based on and you can connect those dots. So tonight we're going to talk about the community profile. Oh, excuse me, could you slide forward for me? Or let me see if this is working. I forgot I had this here. There we go. Okay, I'm in charge now. All right, so tonight we're going to talk about the community profile. We're going to talk about the community engagement work that we did, some survey results, as well as your current level of service. And we're also going to share some comparative budget and FTE analysis we did with the national standards that are out there. So starting with your community profile. So some of this information you're aware of, but we like to make sure it's front and center because a lot of our recommendations are really based off of where you're at today with your community population, your diversity, and your age. So first off, you're sitting at 32,000 presently. You've had tremendous growth. Just back in 2000, you were only sitting at less than 5,000. And so in that time, you see that blue bar jump from 2010, you added 20,000 people in 10 years. That's huge. And I think some of what you're seeing is the department's had a hard time to keep up with that growth. And you've had these HOAs coming in that are supplying some level of service. So we want to recognize that significant growth that you've had. Sitting at that 32,000 presently, you're going to grow by at least another 4,000 in the next 5 years. And some of these numbers have increased just since we did the analysis work. When we were with the staff today, they were sharing some different numbers with us. And part of this sharing of where we're at with our process is also making sure we've got things right as we go. So a couple other things I want to touch on here. Median age, 37, that's pretty standard across the country. But something that stood out to us in our analysis is the red column that you see, that represents Sahuarita. And when you look at where you're at as it relates to those under the age of 18, it's really significant. It's higher than the state, it's higher than the country. So 28% of the population is identifying as under 18. And where you are related to seniors, you're really falling in line as it relates to the state as well as the country. You have a decline in the age of 18 to 24. You've got a big drop off there. Okay. Then just looking at race for a moment, 77% of the population identifies as white, and you've got about 37% who identify as Hispanic. This is over 100%, but if you do identify as Hispanic on the census, you can select a second nationality as well. So switching gears a little bit and sharing what we learned through community engagement. So the opportunities that we had during the month of April is we sat down with a number of stakeholders in the community. We had 3 focus group sessions. We had one session that was focused on park users, another that was on dog parks and pickleball, and a third that was focused on youth in the community. In addition to that, we had a SWOT analysis where we sat down with department members and we talked about strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats for the department into the future. Then we had an open forum that had fantastic attendance. We had 83 individuals show up for that opportunity, and we really learned a lot about what some of the needs are in the community, and I'm going to share those with you here in a moment. And then lastly, we also had a opportunity to be a part of the fiesta back in April, where we had a Dotocracy voting as people were leading the event, just trying to get a pulse again at what some of those facility and program needs are for the future. So it's always kind of where we can gather information on how long individuals have lived in the community or anything related to race or ethnicity. We're always trying to gather that. And we wanted to share this evening that as it relates to the open forum, the majority of people have lived in the community for 10 to 19 years. And that's a great thing to see because they're very familiar with the community and they're familiar with where those needs are. So there were some reoccurring themes from all of those touch points that we had. First, we heard your parks are well maintained. That came out strongly in the focus groups as well as the public forum. We heard a lot of great comments related to the responsiveness and friendliness and the customer service relative to the staff. We also heard there's a general lack of facilities, and we captured what some of those facility needs are through this slide. Residents expressed concerns about the need for a recreation center, an indoor walking track, large indoor fitness center, group fitness space, multi-purpose program rooms, indoor playground, gymnasium, multi-purpose indoor turf, and pool. And I know I'm just listing these all off and they're on the slide, but we did hear these again and again through the process, and we actually have a tracking mechanism with how many times we hear the same comment. So these all rose to the surface. As it relates to facility needs, we heard about batting cages, a need for a field house, and just a general community gathering space, right? So a lot of these are all relating back to some sort of indoor facility. We also heard about an outdoor pool. We heard there's a need for more pickleball courts, specifically in North Sahuarita, mountain bike trails, potentially artificial fields to help supplement those grass fields and to allow rest, because as I referenced earlier, you have a significant number of youth in the community, which means a lot of youth sports and a lot of wear and tear on your sports fields. We heard about a need for an outdoor sports complex, dedicated bike paths, splash pads, ramadas, and inclusive playgrounds. So when we were at the fiesta, we heard things in kind of a different way. It was a very hot day, and we were really trying to decipher who lived in the town and who didn't. We did have nearly 300 touch points at the fiesta, but what rose to the top there was the need for more water. So our outdoor splash pad, as well as a pool. So lesser of the sports field need through that touch point. As it related to programs, we heard that there's really a high need for additional youth programs. That's what surfaced to the top there. Now, with these touch points, what we're really trying to do is we're trying to gather what those needs are, but we're only reaching a certain segment of the community. With the survey, what we're doing is our questions are intended to test what we heard from in-person engagement and the Dotocracy voting on a larger scale, to see if what we heard from those sports groups and the various people at the event hold true throughout the community. So we had a statistically valid survey. We had 4,000 surveys that were mailed direct to homes. And in order to keep it statistically valid, we have the invite side and we have the open link side. Okay, so the 4,000 that were mailed out were considered invite, and individuals have a code that they use that they can go online to complete the survey, or they can do the paper version and mail it back. So with the invite, we had 381 that we received back that did ensure that we were statistically valid. So we hit the number to be there. The results have less than a 5% margin of error. As it relates to the open link, where individuals could just go on the website without a code, complete the survey, we received 134 for a total of 515 surveys. So here's some of what we learned. So as it relates to the invite side, and you're going to hear me reference invite versus open link throughout this presentation, the invite's considered statistically valid. You can just take it once with your code. So with the invite, as it relates to satisfaction on a scale of 1 to 5, there's a 3.8 level of satisfaction with your parks, 3.5 as it relates to facilities, and 3.3 as programs. So relatively strong satisfaction there. As it relates to what's most popular, what's the amenity individuals are using the most? It's really those walking trails. A lot of value related to trails in the community. And I'm going to show you some specific breakdowns in a moment here. So we posed a question related to how should things be funded in the department? So if some of these projects move forward, how do we pay for them? And what rose to the surface was really what was favored the most were those corporate donations, naming rights, fundraising campaigns as a source of funding, whereas there wasn't much support for any sort of taxes or even a utility roundup program. On that piece, there could be an education gap that a roundup program is voluntary. And I'll show you the statistics on it in a moment. So we also learned there's some room for improvement as it relates to communication. Talked about that scale of 1 to 5. As it relates to communication, the department scored a 2.8. And a key takeaway here is the department is heavily using social media, but the survey showed people want to receive email about program and services. And so that's a key piece, knowing that that's a database that needs to be built over time. So as it relates to important facilities for there we go. Let me make sure this is on track. So as it relates to important facilities for improvements, we heard outdoor pools, a rec center, and improvements or renovations to existing parks were the priorities. That's what rose to the surface. With the open link side, we also heard there's need for an indoor sports facility and potentially splash pad, which we do have coming here in the near future. So lastly, the top priority for improvements to program and services, for the invite, it was really fitness oriented. That's where the need is. As it relates to the open link, we heard it's more improvement to programs and services just overall. There wasn't a standout. They wanted more programs, just generally speaking. So there's a way to cross-tabulate all of these questions. So the survey company looks at and cross-tabs importance versus need being met, because everything can be important to a community, but are the needs being met? And so we like to kind of focus on what are those high important items where needs are not being met. And, there was actually very little that surfaced to the top here, which is a pat on the back and in a lot of ways to the services the department is providing. But there were a handful. For the invite survey, outdoor aquatics rose to the top as a low need being met, and I think we can agree there. As it related to the open link, though, there was a few more areas that rose to the top as far as being important and needs not being met. And those included a gym for indoor sports and events, an indoor recreation center, and an outdoor aquatics as well. And then right on the line was also an indoor pool. One thing that we're working with the survey company to try to kind of sort through, and we saw through the open comment section of the survey, there seemed to be some misunderstanding as to what amenities or facilities belong to the town versus what belongs to an HOA. And our sense is that the invite folks had a greater understanding of what was town and what wasn't, but perhaps the invite didn't, because we see more differences in the results than we typically do. So we're working with the survey company to take a deeper dive, especially as it relates to the invite side, because they can associate that code that was used to an address to kind of see how deep those differences are. So we asked some questions about what would increase your use. And what we learned here is additional shade rose to the top, additional amenities, and additional parks on the invite side. On the open link side, communication service surfaced again of needing to be more aware of what's happening in the community. So this is similar to the matrix that I showed a moment ago. Again, talking about facilities and amenities and what the needs are in the next 5 to 10 years. And for the open link, this is where you see that the outdoor pools, the new rec center, and a new indoor sports facility rose to the top. And I highlight those because you can see the differences in the bars. You can see there was specific interest in those elements. On the invite side, everything was really, really similar as far as what was needed. And then the gray is representing an average across the board. So our next one here, is top priorities for programs and services. So here and again on that open link, you see more clarity of what's needed, and that was more aquatic programs as well as year-round programs for youth, where it was very kind of all at the same level for the invite, more fitness rose to the top. And this next slide here is the funding piece that I referenced earlier. So anything in red are things that the community definitely does not support. So the last two on the bottom are the penny sales tax and a property tax. So those really didn't receive, so 41% said we definitely don't support that. What you see in green are those items that were definitely supported. So that's where those corporate donations or individual naming rights, fundraising campaigns, those type of things raised to the surface. So just briefly, we wanted to share a couple of items related to the department's budget as well as their staffing. So the National Parks and Recreation Association, NRPA, works with agencies across the country to gather information on their programs, services, staffing, all kinds of great data points. And it allows us to look at agencies of a similar size and see how the typical agency staffs and funds and what they're providing to their communities. So the typical agency that has a population of 20,000 to 50,000 typically has about 31 full-time equivalent employees. Here in Sahuarita, the count is 18.7. So we see a 12 FTE difference there. We are looking at FY22. It's changed a little bit It's increased a tad from what Laura shared tonight. But we're showing a difference there. Now, parks and facilities, you can also do a comparison. You can categorize what staff are doing. Are they working in parks? Are they providing programming? Are they administrative? And they do that within RPA. So we can do that comparison of what's typical again. And right now we're showing a shortfall in parks. As we continue to dive deeper, though, we need to recognize that there are contracted folks who are helping to support the system, and we need to account for that. But this is kind of our surface level analysis to go. Are things apples to apples? Where are we in the mix? And right now we're seeing a shortfall, and we're going to dive deeper. Dave's been working on the number of acres, and the number of acres can help us to identify what's the appropriate staffing level as well. So then as it relates to budget, for FY22, Sahuarita was at 2.7 million, and our typical agency of 20 to 40,000 is sitting at around 3.2 million. So shortfall there as well. The other key piece that we can look at is per capita spending. So how much is the agency spending on each resident that lives and contributes to the community? So the typical for an agency this size is $100.93 per year, and Sahuarita is sitting at about 86. So that budget isn't trending as your population grows. And that's something as that continued growth, as you bump up and try to reach that median, it still needs to be monitored each year as you continue to grow. Okay, so with that, I'm going to turn it over to Dave here, and he's going to talk about the level of service that he's done.
I'll try and remember to.
Yeah, it's kind of
So I get to go visit parks for a living. I came out in April and visited all your parks. And we call that our inventory and level of service analysis. I learned a few things by going and visiting your parks, and these were some of the thoughts that I had, was that the parks really have a great variety of components. So there was pickleball courts, and there were basketball courts, and there were ping pong tables. There were sports fields, there were picnic ramadas. So a lot of things going on in these parks, a good variety. There was public art in your parks. They're painting the walls with great public art. So that was something that we recognized. I liked the volleyball courts. It seemed to be a great standard for sand volleyball courts. If you go around the country and look at volleyball courts, I might point other agencies to here to get their standard. We saw dog parks with a lot of people gathered around in little circles and bringing their own lawn chairs. So the idea that maybe we need to kind of have a gathering area within these dog parks, because we know that dog parks aren't just about dogs. Dog parks are about kind of the social aspect that us humans do when we take our dogs to the dog park. There's a lot of trails, but we weren't seeing the trails on our digital mapping. So we're driving around with this iPad looking at the maps and not seeing those trails on the maps. So there seemed to be this need to get all those in GPS or in kind of Google Maps, if you will. So being able to track those trails digitally, because we're all moving to our cell phones, and we use our cell phones to go everywhere. As we were driving around, we drove around a lot of the HOAs, subdivisions. A lot of people out walking on those trails and sidewalks, and that seemed to be an important supplement to the town's level of service, but recognizing that people are walking in these neighborhoods, and those facilities are available to at least people that live in those subdivisions. And then we went to a lot of HOA parks, if you will. So we not only wanted to know kind of what the town provides as level of service, but what other things are available to people. And if I live in this subdivision, what do I have available to use? So it became apparent that those HOA parks were really important to the system, especially when we talked about, or when we'll talk about walkable level of service. So what is available within a 10-minute walk of my house? So those HOA parks really seemed important to that. As we went around, we created a digital map of each park. So we located all of those things that you could go to a park to use. So we located all of the picnic shelters, all of the playgrounds, all of the tennis courts, all the pickleball courts. We located them in GIS. And so that becomes something that we give back to the city. And we struggled a little bit with actually getting that GIS information up front. So we created this big database of GIS data for the city for this project. We also created this scorecard, if you will, for each park. And this is just an example of one of the parks. But we listed all of those components. So a component is something that you might go to a park to use, like a playground or a tennis court or the disc golf course, the dog park. So those are components. We counted all those, and then we applied a quality score. So was that a really good dog park, or was that just kind of a dog park that needs to be fixed up? So we graded everything, if you will, on a scale of 1 to 3, with 3 being really good, and 1 being, we need to do something about this. We also know that there's certain things that you can put in a park that make it more comfortable, make it more convenience. We heard in the survey that how important shade was in Sahuarita. And so we count that. We know that if you have shade in a park, you can stay longer. We know that if there's a restroom in a park, moms don't have to pack up the kids and go to McDonald's to use the restroom. So having a restroom in a park makes it more convenient. And so that elevates the score of a park. So you can't really see it because of the line through it, but we created a score for each park, and we gave it kind of this overall score. Again, we have this big data set now, and we can sort it for, say, all of the playgrounds. Where are all the playgrounds in town? And how did they score? What was the quality of those playgrounds? Were there any comments associated with that? This one was smaller and older than the others. So just some general comments as we were driving around. We could do this with tennis courts, pickleball courts, dog parks, and all those things. In the end, we were able to create these digital maps, these pretty maps with the green showing kind of where those parks are. We concentrated first on what are the town of Sahuarita's parks. But we also looked at all of these other parks that are in the area that people may be using or people may have access to. We tried to keep that separate. We tried to do some different analyses, and I'll get to that in a minute, but trying to really look at what is available in the area. We can do a basic summary of that inventory. So on the left is kind of all of those publicly available facilities, whether it's trailheads that we went by, all of your parks, the schools that are available after hours, some of those other Pima County parks, if you will, some of those things that are just available to the general public. On the right, a little bit grayed out, are all those HOA parks that we went to. We also listed how many different things there are to do in those parks. So this column is the total number of components at those parks. And again, those components are those things that you can go do at those parks. And that diversity, so that means that if you have 20 horseshoe pits, you really don't get extra points for having 20 horseshoe pits, because that's kind of cheating, if you will. It matters that there's a horseshoe pit, it matters that there's a playground, it matters that there's a picnic shelter, it matters that there's a loop walk. It's more important that I have 4 different things to do than 4 horseshoe pits. I've put all those scores from all these parks, so again, those scorecards, to see which parks kind of rank at the top. Which is our best park? What park provides the highest level of service? Animax provides the highest level of service. There's so much to do at Animax. There's so many things going on there. There's a dog park, there's ball fields, there's a playground, there's a skate park, there's the little indoor facility, kind of all of these things going on. So people that live close to Animax have a high level of service. I kept schools in kind of their own category. We typically will discount schools 50% because they're only available part of the time. And some schools really aren't available at all. Or we may program at some of those schools in off hours. Again, there's kind of these Pima County parks, these other public access parks that seem to be available to the public. Some of them only had like a trailhead. I could go park there and access a trail. And then you have all these HOA parks, which again are providing level of service, but just to a certain segment of the community. And so we kept that limited kind of to that neighborhood. What is that HOA park providing just to that neighborhood, to that HOA? Teresa talked about our comparisons to NRPA or the National Recreation Park Association. Well, we travel all over the country looking at parks, and we kind of keep our own data set, and I feel like it's a little bit better because I can compare apples to apples a little bit more because I've been to all these parks. Our data set is currently about 86 different agencies. I've looked at about 31,000 components across the country. So that's, again, tennis courts, playgrounds, picnic shelters. I've looked at about 5,000 different parks across the country. When I compare your parks to that data set, one park is in the top 100. And I think this is something that you can really celebrate. The fact that you have one of the top 100 parks in this data set, and that's Animax Park. So there's a lot going on. It's providing high level service, and it ranks pretty high kind of across the country. Even more impressive is the fact that all 5 of your parks kind of rank in this top 10%. So when you are developing parks, you're developing them at a high level. We can also compare you to other similar sized agencies. So that was all agencies. This goes down to just what are other similar sized communities providing? This is pretty telling too. Again, there is no right or wrong here, but this really, to me, describes what your system is all about. You have 12 components per park. Again, you're developing these very high-level parks, these high-scoring parks, these top 10% of all parks in our data set, because you're putting 12 components in those parks. You have all these playgrounds and ball fields and tennis courts and disc golf courses, and you're really filling up these parks. And that's resulting in this high parks components per location, but also in this average score. So again, the number of components is directly related to that score. And you're higher than those other agencies. Where you begin to show low is in this total number of parks. So depending on kind of how we count and what we count as a park in Zahrita, you're between 7 and 10, depending on if we count the schools or count the trailheads as yours. Anyway, whether we call this 7 or 10, Post Falls, Idaho has 59 parks that they're taking care of. And that maybe goes back to some of these FTEs, that they have a lot more people because they're taking care of a lot more parks. But with those 59 parks, they're not developing them at the same level. So they're only putting 3, 4, 5 components in those parks. So smaller parks, more of a neighborhood park, a pocket park type model. We're developing at this community park, this big 12 component park, all of these things going on that we expect people to kind of maybe go a little bit further to get to. We're going to do fewer of them, but we're going to do kind of bigger, more involved parks, if you will. So again, not that there's anything right or wrong with any of this, but it just kind of helps describe your system. You're kind of at this community park level, and these other agencies are more at this neighborhood and pocket park level of development. Again, National Recreation and Park Association puts out more statistics. This is all about statistics, if you will. And they keep track of, at similar levels, How many playgrounds do other agencies have? And if we compare Sahuarita to NRPA's median, you're short about 5 playgrounds. Again, not really right or wrong, but it's kind of describing your system. Again, this kind of community park, larger system. Basketball courts, you're maybe okay with basketball courts. Pickleball courts, you're short 1 pickleball court. Or maybe more, depending on who you ask. But the interesting thing here was that you actually show this surplus in fields, and we definitely heard different from the community at the last meeting about those fields. And so we're really trying to dive in deeper to find out, is it really a shortage of fields, or is it kind of that programming of those, the allocation of those? What is it about those fields that is causing 83 people to show up at a meeting? To say we need more fields. We need more access to fields, I think is what they were saying. We can also look at acres of parkland per capita. So how many acres do typical agencies have? Right now, depending on what we count, again, this is a counting game, we're showing about 3 acres of developed park per 1,000 people. If we compare that to NRPA's median, NRPA is at about 10 acres. So if we want to get to what kind of other agencies are doing with just acres, we need to add almost 200 acres of parks. Now, we may be doing this with the development of the Trails Park at Twin Buttes, which is going to come online. So we're going to add 96 acres there. Depending on how we count schools, some agencies will count schools, so maybe we count the fields that we're maintaining and allowing the community use at schools. Maybe we have a few more acres, but I don't think we're going to get to this currently. So again, a counting game. What do we use? What do we not use? We're still kind of sort out what we want to use. So we took all those park scores and we create these fancy maps. And really what these fancy maps say is the darker the orange, the higher level of service. So if I live in an area that's really dark orange, if I live by Animax Park, I have a really dark orange color. That means I have a lot going on. We already know that Animax scores really high. So if I live over there and I can walk to that park, I have a really high level of service. If I live over here, I may only have access to a trail. There's not much over there. Yeah, there's a green space, but can I get to it? Do I have to go through the parking lot behind 5 buildings to get to that trailhead, to get on that trail? What is my level of service? Again, what is my access to park components within walking distance of my house? So on the left is just Sahuarita's parks and some other public parks kind of within the city limits. This map on the right includes those HOA parks. So the city may not be providing it there, but the HOAs are providing that level of service in those specific neighborhoods within walking distance. What these orange gradient maps don't tell us is what should that level of service be? What should every person, every kid in Sahuarita be able to access within a 10-minute walk of my house? We took a stab at determining kind of what that level of service should be based on kind of what we heard in the survey, kind of what we know nationally. We tend to think that everybody should have access to a park with a playground. We figure that everybody should have access to a park with a piece of green turf so they can go throw the frisbee, kick the soccer ball, play catch with their kids. We know how important walking is, so we hope that maybe that park is big enough to have a loop walk. People love to go walk on loop walks. I'm gonna go get my 10,000 steps by walking around this park. So 3 components, and maybe there's a half-court basketball hoop there. So maybe I can go shoot hoops or play pickleball with my friends, or maybe it's both. Maybe it's an overlay of pickleball at my basketball court, so get a little extra bonus in there. So if everybody had access to those 4 components, wouldn't that be great? From anywhere in town. We also heard that everybody wants access to trails. Trails are so important across the country. What if everybody had access to a trail within walking distance of their house? And so 4 components in a trail. So this map is really breaking down that orange gradient. So same data, the same level of service, but where are we above those 4 components? Where are we below those 4 components? And where do people have to get in their car and drive to a park with 4 components or 12 components? And so in this map, purple is good. People that live in a purple area at least have access to a park with 4 components and a trail. So purple's good. Yellow means I have access to something. It may just be a trail. It may be a little neighborhood pocket park that an HOA is providing, but you're really going to call that a park? It's a piece of open turf. There's only one thing for me to do there. And then again, gray, if I live there, I may have to get in the car and drive. Understanding that, at least in these maps, a lot of the gray may currently be orchards. And we don't need to provide level of service. My favorite example of this is we did a project in Arlington County, Virginia a few years ago. There's this big gray area in the northern part of Arlington County, Virginia. It's the National Cemetery, Arlington National Cemetery. And so we don't need to provide playgrounds and swing sets and pickleball courts in the cemetery. So just because something gray is gray doesn't mean we need to provide service there. We see it a lot on airport properties where we won't have any, we don't need to provide parks there. So just because it's gray doesn't mean it's bad, but we need to look at that area. So purple's good, yellow's, we need to do something. Gray, let's think about what's going on there. We see on the right here how the HOA parks, especially up north, have really filled that area with purple. So they're probably getting the service they need up there, and we don't need to provide that service up there. Let's concentrate on where we're missing. Where we may have city streets, residential areas that are currently gray. Maybe that should be our focus. Are there some areas, again, just looking at the street pattern, residential areas that are yellow? So they have access to something, but not enough. That's kind of our next step. We can also pull the actual statistics, the demographics, the census data for those areas. And I can tell you that 61% of the population lives in a purple area. And I think that's pretty good. Kind of considering where we are, I wouldn't consider this a real walkable community, but 61% maybe changes my mind. And the fact that we have 76% with access to something, if we could change this, if we could add a couple components here to make that purple, all of a sudden we have 3/4 of the town that have walkable access at that high level. So I think this is kind of that low-hanging fruit maybe. This is something we may have to acquire land. We may have to purchase land and add a park. Or we may have to make sure that our next HOA, our next development that comes into town is kind of providing those pocket parks in those areas, those neighborhood parks. Or it's a combination of the two. we're relying on HOAs for that 10-minute walk, and we're providing those community parks kind of strategically around town. So again, maybe our goal isn't 100% walkability. Maybe there's always going to be some areas of town that people have to get in their car and drive. And so we pull out a little bit and look at, what if we just looked at what do people have access to within 1 mile of their house? So we ran all the same analysis. We looked at the orange gradient maps. I determined again that if everybody had access within 1 mile of those 4 components and that trail, wouldn't that be great? 81% live in a purple area then. So at 1 mile, this little larger service area, only 10% are yellow, 9% are gray. So again, I think this is pretty good, something we can celebrate. Because even though with your lack of parks, we've shown you kind of don't have enough parks, you're still doing a pretty good job of providing parks kind of where people live. Or you have somebody providing parks where people live. Questions? Comments?
I have a question. Why was Green Valley included in the survey? Why were the parks and areas in Green Valley included?
We really just wanted to see what was out there. We didn't necessarily, I did separate analysis. I did analysis for inside of Sahuarita and then kind of kept that other stuff outside. With recognizing that those parks are not open to the general public, but you don't need to provide service down there. Somebody's providing service down there. And there's some county parks down there. So definitely not saying that residents of Sahuarita have access to Green Valley parks. Definitely not saying that. Just recognizing kind of what is in the area.
Commissioners, any questions? No? Okay. Commissioner Jeff Ahern?
This probably is more question for Laura. Will this data be available on online for the public to be able to read and recognize eventually?
Yes, all of this presentation will be on our websites and on our, Facebook and, all of our social media. And one of the things too is that they mentioned is that in this, we saw that the way we're communicating to the public isn't, exactly how they want it communicated, which is a really interesting finding. And I think some of that goes down to the fact that most of our HOAs in the area communicate with their residents through email. And so we are now in the process of collecting that. And so yes, all of these findings, and as when we get to the final phases of everything will be made public to everyone.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Allen?
Yes, thank you. Dave, you mentioned in your presentation that sometimes you count you count school district, school properties, parks, fields, maybe 50% or what number did you use for when you did it here?
We used 50%.
50%.
And that was because,
Okay.
They took us over there and they had to unlock the gates. I couldn't
Yeah.
just walk in and use those. So
Okay.
we want to recognize that you actually have an IGA with 2 schools and those are available. We waited at the one school until the gate opened just so we could walk in. So it is an issue.
Right.
And
I'm sorry, the reason I ask is because the way you put it, it sounded like sometimes we use 50%, and I didn't know that,
I did.
defined what it was for here. Thank you.
Any other questions? Laura, do you have any other comments? Anything you want to add?
Just that this, survey, it brings up a lot of, I think, really interesting information as we move forward and we learn the needs of our community. This kind of survey and data collection really gives us an opportunity to really go after the things that the people in our community are asking for. We've talked with the consultants that it's brought up some really interesting things that I didn't even think about. And so we will have to approach it and rethink some of the things that we were even thinking about, the needs of the community. So, but thank you, Teresa and Dave, for your presentation, and thank you, commissioners, and that's all I have.
Okay, well, thank you, Laura. Thank you, Teresa and Dave. Very informative.
Oh, wait. We have,
Oh,
sorry, Erin has.
sorry. I can't hear. Can you repeat it, Laura? Sorry, Vice Chair Thomas is on the phone, so we're having trouble hearing her. Go ahead.
Are you able to hear me okay?
Can you hear Laura? I can't hear down here. I can hear her.
Just repeat the question.
So thank you very much for this insightful presentation. It does give us a lot of insight into the parts of our town. I wanted to find out, so when you're talking about the percentage of people who, like, their residents who live in 61% are, and let me just make sure that, so 61% of our population is in an HOA, correct? So with the purple area. So, and that means that 39% of our population is not being served with parks within 10 minutes of their home, with what I've heard so far.
I think you were confusing the statistics a little bit.
Say that again.
I think you were confusing the statistics a little bit.
Oh, okay. All right. It was kind of in and out, so I wanted to make
Right,
sure.
right.
Wanted to make sure I wasn't. Yeah. No. And then, as far as when you were talking about the 12 components of parks, I couldn't see it, but what were the 12 components of the parks that you were talking about?
They vary from each park, but on average, Sahuarita's parks have about 12 components on average. And that could be fields, picnic shelters, skate park, dog park, playgrounds, open turf areas, loop walks, kind of all of those things. And again, I think the town is really doing a great job of providing a variety. We saw a number of different game courts, if you will, or a ping pong table, and I think you had a Connect Four maybe even. So some things that we typically don't see. So a great variety of different types of components.
Okay. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it, and I really enjoyed the presentation. I think it'll give us a lot of insight into helping our residents.
Okay.
Laura, maybe you can we have the presentation emailed to us?
Absolutely.
So that we can study it more too? Because it's a lot of numbers to take in, but thank you, it did help.
Yes,
Thank
we
you.
will email the commission.
Thank you. Okay, so, no more comments, questions? Okay, moving on. Twin Buttes Park Trails Plan, or as some people used to come into the meetings and say, Twin Butts. Twin Buttes, we'll say.
Thank you. So we have one last item here that's exciting because we have their Twin Buttes Trail Plan. And this is in correlation with the National Park Service Rivers, Trails, and Conservation Assistance Program. Say that 10 times fast. So we've been working with the National Park Service to develop our trail plan for the Twin Buttes Trail Park. This is the about 99% draft, final. We are open to comments to help us finalize this plan. But to give you a little bit of an overview, so there's approximately half of a mile of ADA compliant pathways, which would include either asphalt or concrete. Then there is also going to be some educational signage, shade seating, and trailhead restrooms. And the trailhead restrooms will come off of the parking lot that has already been built there. And then on top of that, we have an extension of about 2.5 miles of looping trails, and that's the green. So the black is the asphalt or the concrete trail, and then the green is just the natural trails. But they will also be built to be adaptive bike, mountain bike standards. So a little bit wider and a little bit harder surface than the average, just, mountain trail kind of trails. There'll also be shaded seating, and then, of course, we have the great scenic overview of the Santa Rita Mountains. This has been a great collaboration. We're kind of coming to the end of it, but you also saw in the budget that we do have some initial funding to put in the restroom and to start some of the trail work this year. And so I will take any questions or comments you have on this trail plan.
Commissioner Allen?
Yes, thank you. Do we have running water out there?
We do not.
Okay, so this be like a latrine type thing, the restroom?
The plan is initially because there is also so it's 98 acres, but 72 of it will be parkland. So the upper about 20 acres is going to be a public works, parks and recreation, and police facility. So we will be pulling some wells for that facility, and then we'll pull it down so that there is some places that will have water, and especially for our restrooms.
Thank you.
Commissioner Michelle Ahern?
Approximately how long is this going to take to build, do you think?
It will take 2 or 3 years to kind of put it all together. We did get an initial about $450,000 to start, which will give us a really good start at it. It'll get us our restroom, and we do have to do a septic tank out there, so we'll have to do that. We'll have to build the well, but it will give us a good, really beefy start on those trails. And of course, we want to be strategic in it though too. We build a section of it, make sure that we have, some amenities, shade structures, some sitting benches to go into certain sections as we go, so that people can use it and still, because we don't want people out there and not be safe also, because it is, out there quite a ways, and it is trails, so we want people in the heat to have a safe place to get in shade.
Any other questions, comments?
I-
Commissioner Allen?
Yes, I would just like to say it looks great. I like the plan, the layout. I feel really good about it. So I just want to let you know. Thank you.
Commissioner Anderson?
I just have one question. Is that just one shade area, or there's plans for the more shaded areas throughout it? Is that just the one in that circle?
There's more plans for more
Okay.
shaded. This just gives us the initial design.
Okay.
And then it's really up to us to put more benches and ramadas and shade structures as we feel our community needs.
Vice Chair Thomas, go ahead.
So I'm not sure if I can talk about it a little bit because I'm on this committee as well. Is that okay?
Yeah, you're okay.
Okay. All right. So one of the things that we're making sure that this is an inclusive, as Laura had said, an inclusive trailhead. And so we want to be able to make sure that all ages can use it and all abilities. So for example, even like for recumbent bikes, so people in wheelchairs, people with walkers, that from the parking lot to the sidewalk, that it's easier for them to have a softer surface in order to, so there's not as many bumps. So there's going to be different areas for it. That the going around corners, it's going to be so the way that the wildlife, the plants, that's easy to see around corners as well. So if people are lower in wheelchairs, that they can also see around the corners, or if they're sitting down. So making it safe for everybody, was one of our priorities, to make sure that it's fully, of course it's ADA compliant, but it's also a lot of people can use it. Okay, I'm done.
Thank you.
Chairwoman. One other thing too is that, this has been out to the public. It's been on our webpage. It's been on social media. We also put up a bulletin at the town library. to the county library so that people can give us input on anything that they see that they would like to be added to this plan. But so far, all the comments have been very positive. Everyone's very excited. And so if you feel like there's any changes that we need to make, we would gladly, make any changes that you have for us.
Do you want us to make a motion to approve it at this stage?
If you feel comfortable with that, yes, please.
Do I have a motion? Commissioner Allen, I know I could count on you.
I'll motion to approve it.
Okay, do I have a second?
I'll second it.
Commissioner Jeff Ahern, okay, second. Any further discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. Okay. So, Commissioner and Director report on current events. Guess that's you again, Laura.
That's me again. I really don't have much update just because we've had our survey and we've had a lot this evening. But just one reminder that we do have our 4th of July celebration, and this year it has been rebranded to Sarita Stars and Stripes. It will be held here at Town Hall from 5 to 9 o'clock on July 4th, and we will have large-scale fireworks. We are able to secure them. And then we also have a laser show. There will be beer and wine gardens. There will be tons of food vendors and other vendors, a lot of fun things. It's going to be out here. We're also going to have a huge water fight. We've had, 3,500 squirt guns?
Lacey's out there right now?
30, yeah, we bought 3,500 squirt guns, and we'll have troughs, and we have some cannons and lots of sunscreen. But then we're also have the concerts, and we brought in shade structures with misters, and so it's going to be a really fun event. There'll be almost 30 minutes of large scale entertainment. 38 minutes between the laser show and fireworks. So it's something that we've never done before. So this one it should be super fun. There's also, and on top of that, I almost forgot, there's going to be a car show and a car parade. So get all the neighbors out because it's going to start at Wrights and Ridge, and they're going to take the classic cars and the side-by-sides and the motorcycles around the loop of Sarita Boulevard and then back into here for the festival. And we're telling them to be loud and obnoxious and do this fun parade all through town and then come into the event. This should be a really, really fun event. And then also to give you a quick update that our fitness court, our national fitness court, outdoor fitness court that we got the grant for and then also council approved us to build, was built at Animax Park in this last couple weeks. And we will do a grand opening on July 21st. Where the mayor will come out and he's going to cut our ribbon, and we're going to celebrate the fact that we have at least a community-wise free fitness court for people to enjoy. And other than that, I think that's all I have.
Are the fireworks going up the same place as last year?
No, this year because, the 4th of July has typically been at the lake, and this year it's here at the town hall. And so we're going to fire the fireworks off at Wrights and Ridge School. So it'll actually be great viewing because the one time during COVID we shot it off of Wrights and Ridge, you can actually see them through the whole valley. And because of where the laser show and everything is going to come right up over the top of us here at Town Hall.
Okay, thank you. Are you still looking for vendors? Because I hear you advertise on the radio all the time, still looking for vendors?
Yes, we have a few spots left, so
Okay.
we'd love to have anyone come join us.
Okay. Any questions? Any? No?
If I could, I just want.
Commissioner Allen.
Yeah, thank you. I keep getting on this button. I know I can't comment on the resident that spoke, but I'm glad she picked a good night to come here and give her opinion because I think it was followed up by an excellent presentation by Dave and Teresa. So hopefully you see the same things they saw and we see. So, okay. You beat them to it. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay.
Is
Thank
that
you.
it, Laura? Okay. Any commissioners have anything they would like to report? Okay. Future agenda items? If you think of anything you want on the agenda, just let Laura know. Our next meeting is not until September.
Correct.
Long way off. Hopefully it'll be cooler by then. Okay. Anything else? Okay. Meeting adjourned at 7:22.